So welcome back. I hope you enjoyed exploring the virtual campus, some of you, and it will be open. Well, it's open now, but hopefully you'll go there after the sessions for sort of further exploration and have a chat with other people and some of the presenters, a sort of networking session if you wish. So we're going to move on to our next presenter now. Thomas is founder of Deep, a Canadian-based studio dedicated to exploring and defining the evolving language of cinematic VR. Thomas is an Emmy Award-winning producer, writer, and director, working in film and interactive media. In addition to producing many cross-media projects for television, he has written and directed 8 award-winning feature documentaries. He's the recipient of numerous honors, including 2 Emmy Awards and 5 nominations, including 3 Geminis, Rose d'Or, 2 SXSW Interactive Awards, and 2 Webbys. So Thomas will be introducing a revolutionary new product for us called Jackknife XR. This is a 3rd generation of their revolutionary liquid cinema application, and Thomas is going to demonstrate this with some examples from Project Origami, which they developed in collaboration with Facebook and Oculus. So I think we're ready. We're going to play the pre-recorded video from Thomas, and then he's going to join us for a live Q&A after the event. So over to you, Emily, if you could roll the video.
Hi there, my name is Thomas Wallner from Liquid Cinema, and today, because the topic is WebXR, I want to introduce Jackknife XR to you. Jackknife XR is a desktop authoring application that creates projects that are meant for playout in WebXR. So today I'm going to show you a project that we did with Facebook Reality Labs. That is called The Magic of Flight. If you go to fly.fan, you'll see this project page, The Magic of Flight. So let's have a look at some projects here. These run both on Chrome desktop and on the Quest 2. But for the sake of demonstration, it'll be easier to show you this on the desktop. Projects run on both. And maybe after the session, you can just don a Quest 2 and try it out yourself by going to the Oculus browser and going to fly.fan. Let's see what is noteworthy about the various functions of Jackknife that can enable you to tell better stories in WebXR. So let's look at this first project called Bird Notes. So one of the things you'll notice here is that there are a couple of elements working together. We've got a 360 monosphere, and then we have an animated model of a hummingbird. And one of the things that you can do in Jackknife is you can synchronize models to videos running in absolute sync. And this writing over the chalkboard, and the chalkboard is a 3D model, this writing is actually a video that has an alpha channel in it. And so you can bring all these elements together in a scene to achieve this effect. There you go. Okay. So let's have a look at how that looks in the tool, where we have this particular video on a plane. And it's actually, I lied to you, it's not an alpha channel. In this case, it's a chroma key. We can do both. So if I disable the chroma key, now we can see that the video is running here. So you can see that it's basically in the 3D space of the monosphere. The other thing that's noteworthy is that this particular hummingbird here was actually animated in Maya and imported into Jackknife as a GLB, which is a 3D file format, which is very well suited for WebXR, which contains the animations and the meshes and the textures. So you can either use Jackknife XR as a staging tool where you bring in assets from other tools like After Effects and Maya, or you can actually animate things yourself. We do have a keyframer, but it really depends. Some people really like to do their animations in a program more familiar to them, and then you bring it into this program here. And why don't we look this time at the Monument Valley scene? This Monument Valley scene is actually not a 360 video. This is a photogrammetry model of a section of Monument Valley. And this eagle is a GLB that was imported into Jackknife, which was animated in Maya. We also feature the ability to control camera angles. So as we fly over the scene, we can change the camera angle. And I'm just going to pause it here, and then we are basically moving in on Gloria, who's one of the presenters of The Magic of Flight. And what I want you to notice is that she's holding a little paper airplane, which was part of the green screen shoot. And she will throw it, and at that moment, the paper airplane that she's holding, that's on a 2D video plane, will actually turn into a model that flies at us, which is probably best appreciated in VR, but it shows also this absolute sense of sync that we can achieve to create really nice transitions between flat screen video and 360 models. So let's have a look at that.
Flight. Miraculous, magical, majestic. How did something so breathtaking make the journey from our imagination all the way to the moon in just 65 years? It's my job to ask the big questions and make sure we stay on track. To discover how we went from looking to the skies in awe to cruising above the clouds, we're turning to the Top Gun pilot.
All right, here it comes. She's going to throw the plane at us.
I'm tossing this over to you.
All right, so that was Monument Valley. Okay, let's look at Monument Valley in another mode, because I want to point out a specific feature for you. So let's go into the project again, and we have a mode in the web player where we can actually play with the settings. They're not recorded. In the future, those settings will actually talk back to the authoring tool in a bidirectional sync, but right now it's more for testing. But I want to show you something. So Gloria has a shadow under her, and that shadow is actually programmatic, and it's created out of the alpha channel for Gloria. So let's have a look at that. And so, for instance, I can change the height of it. I can skew rotate it to another place. I can put it in front or in the back. And this is very handy because when you're using green screen elements, it routes them to an object and gives that illusion that you especially need in VR to make sure that it looks like she's actually standing on the model. So if we go back,
magical,
you can
majestic.
see.
How did hold
it. We can actually see that even in the flight. Here we have that shadow there. I actually, because I changed it, you can see it skews upward a little bit, so I could change that. Here is it. Yeah, it's the tilt. Here I can align it more to the actual object. There we go. And then you see it here as well. And I can change the blur on it. This is all in real time, basically, at the time of playback. And what else can I do? I can change the intensity on it, and I can actually even change the color on it to match the lighting if I wanted to. Now this is of course absurd. You would not have a red shadow, but just to illustrate this. Okay, so let's look at another scene now, episode 3, Lightweights. That's got a number of things that are going on that might be interesting to you. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so we have a monoscopic sphere, and notice the airplane was flying and being occluded by this door here, which is kind of interesting because this is a monosphere and that is actually a 3D model.
Record holder for paper airplane distance. And we're going to start small, really small, even smaller than that paper airplane.
And these dandelion
What is
seeds
it about these dandelion seeds that lets them stay
are
alive?
actually 3D models
Spreading their weight out, they're tiny
that are
little bit of
falling
weight over a
down
large
around
area.
us.
That helps them move down slower. And if you mix in a little wind energy, like a breeze, they disappear.
And there's that 3D
But is
model of the
that
plane.
really flying? Well, of course, to explore that notion, I've got a paper airplane that I've invented here. This thing is called a tumbling wing, and it's really quite an interesting aircraft. If you drop it, it falls in an organized fashion. And all I need to do is walk behind it and scoop some air upward with my hands, and as long as the air is moving up, the same speed the plane's moving down, it rides right there in that wave of air. A little bit like sky surfing.
What's really interesting about that is you can try this for yourself by watching it in the Oculus. So although John is not, a captured, model of using videogrammetry, which by the way would be way, way too heavy for the Quest and for WebXR in the kind of scenarios where we would like to see this playing back. The difference when you're watching it is actually hardly discernible because at a certain distance, he really feels three-dimensional. And in the scene, he's actually walking around. We see him from the side and from the back, and your eye completely thinks that he's three-dimensional in front of you. So it really changes the economy of scale of bringing in human elements into scenes. I think the human element is very important, and it's nice to know that you can do a really good job with this with the traditional green screen effect, basically. So let's keep looking at the scene, and there will be somebody coming in from the left through the door, actually also a green screen performance. And I want you to keep in mind that what's happening here is that this is a monosphere, but somehow we've managed to occlude elements, occlude the person coming in, just like the 3D model of the plane we saw before, with elements in this actual 3D scene. So note especially how their body will actually be seen through here, but actually occluded by this particular part of the desk. So let's have another look at that.
So obviously everything on this planet has weight. Gravity causes weight. And if I stop helping this plane fly, there's no way it can stay in the air. Weight wins. Or it gets blown away. I thought you were here to help keep us on track.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's have a look at that. So let's go back. So you see Gloria coming in, and if I inch her forward a little bit, we can actually see her being, occluded by the door frame. So actually the front part, which is covering the back part. See, very nicely. And that really gives us, the illusion that she's walking through that particular space. So let's have a look at that in the authoring tool and see how that is achieved, because it's actually achieved quite easily. So let's go in here. Okay, so here we have the scene in the authoring tool. And you can see the various elements. So you have John and Gloria, which is basically this video here.
As weight.
And then you have the dandelion seeds, which were falling down, which is the GLB animation, the plane that comes in and out. And then we have the classroom itself. And what we can do basically when we we have something called an occlusion map. So this is what this occlusion map looks like. It's a little small to see. Here, let's see if we can actually pull it out of the project and see it a little bit bigger. So this occlusion map is basically a depth map. But what we did here is we made it very, very simple. It just really took somebody who took the ECRI and they traced the foreground and background elements in Photoshop. So it wasn't very sophisticated. Anybody can basically do that. And then what we do is that you can choose an element that you want affected by the occlusion map. And you go into it and you say, this video, please use this occlusion map. And then we can set the depth of that element vis-a-vis the occlusion map, and so we can control, you know, whether John is in front of something or behind something. So it's a really easy trick and quite easy to set up, which is quite wonderful because you can do a lot of neat tricks with it to give the illusion of bringing things together without it actually getting too complicated. All right. Okay, so onward, let's look at another scene. Here's called Episode 11, Magic Balance. Let's have a look at that one to get a better idea of the keyframing capabilities of the of Liquid Cinema. So here is, let's just watch this scene. So notice that there's a camera movement in on the plane.
This idea of balancing invisible forces, this is the magic that powers flight. But to really understand how lift and weight interact, we have to do a deeper dive into the relationship between weight and gravity. Now, gravity causes weight, of course, but it does it in a really interesting way. It creates a point around which the object is going to spin. And it doesn't matter whether the object is falling or flying. We call that center of spin the center of gravity. Now, gravity acts on the whole object, of course, but it's that very particular rotational center that is the center of gravity. And gravity is a heavy idea. It really sucks. What?
So there's a number of things going on in this particular scene. One is a camera movement where we come in onto this model here. And John, who is a separate video, is actually childed to the airplane wing. So whatever movements that we see on the airplane translate over to John. The second thing is to notice the programmatic shadow, which is wedded to the airplane wing, which is created out of the alpha channel in this particular case. And then the other thing is the real-time reflections that we see on the wing of the sky sphere, of these clouds, you know, above and below the airplane. And all that is being executed in real time in WebXR, which creates a pretty great effect. So let's look at this making of video. Here is a visualization that we did in Maya beforehand to figure out what we were going to do or what we're going to create with Jackknife XR to make it work in WebXR. So let's have a look at this.
Gravity acts on the whole object, of course, but it's that very particular rotational center that is the center of gravity. And gravity is a heavy idea. It really sucks.
Okay, he falls off. So let's take a look behind the scenes. So we actually shot him like this in a green screen studio.
Gravity. Now, gravity acts on the whole object, of course, but it's that very particular rotational center.
But in Jackknife XR, we actually put him onto the wing.
It really sucks.
So we had to child him to the airplane, and so let's have a look at the authoring tool and see how that plays out. So here's a scene in Liquid Cinema where we have John and the airplane and the sky sphere. So it's actually a fairly simple scene, you know, from a setup point of view. So one of the things that we have here is we have the camera, which moves in. So here are the camera moves that are actually created in a Jackknife keyframer. Actually, Jackknife has a really nice keyframer where all the parameters of Jackknife can now be controlled with curves. It's very sophisticated. So, and then we have John, who is actually wedded to the airplane wing, and this is him sliding off of it. And he is, if we have a look at him, here, let's pick him in the timeline. There he is. So you can see he's actually a two-dimensional plane, and you can actually see his keyframing path, which is drawn in by Jackknife, so you can sort of visualize that. Let me just increase the size of that. So then, and then he's keyframed as well. So if we look at his keyframes here in the latter part of it, that's him falling. And this here in the background, what you see are the camera is the camera move at the beginning of the scene. There we go. That's the camera moving in on the plane, and he's rotating with that so that he retains his three-dimensionality. So when the scene actually plays like this, you can see him rotate as we go by him, and all of that is achieved with the Jackknife keyframer. The moves, the subtle moves of the plane actually were done in Maya. And what we did is to get our data in from Maya, we exported it to Adobe After Effects and then into Liquid Cinema. But that means there were certain camera movements and object movements that we were able to transfer without having to rebuild them. And you can see the curves here, and then you can, in our keyframer, and then you can actually tweak them. And that's really a good thing to do because Maya and After Effects, of course, don't have a VR view. And I'll talk later how you can live preview things while you're authoring on the web via a live link that allows you to see your changes in the authoring tool in real time. I'll get to that later, but the importation of keyframing data from other programs is really useful because you don't want to go through multiple iterations of iterating, let's say, movements in Maya, which you can't see in VR, putting it in Liquid Cinema, and then changing and going through the whole process again. So really the workflow is if you don't want to do it directly in Jackknife, you can do it in Maya, import it, but then tweak it while watching it in VR in real time in the tool. And that really cuts down on time in terms of putting things together and refining them. Okay, so let's watch an earlier scene that starts with some 360 video. I want to show you something. So this is a 360 video, and what we're doing is actually we're cutting. It's one continuous video, but we will be cutting inside the video itself. So these are not actually cuts in the video, these are cuts that are being created by Liquid Cinema.
Have a look around. Test pilot of solar energy aircraft Eric Raymond shows us the possible future. This extraordinary solar-powered aircraft generates its own energy using the sun. No exhaust emissions and almost no sound. The wings are huge so that the plane requires less speed to stay in the air.
Okay, now we're going to see another cut. It's the same angle and the same video, but it's another cut. The implications of this are really quite interesting. Let's go into the authoring tool to look at something that is really particular to Jackknife that doesn't really exist anywhere else. There's a segment here, it's called Solar Plane 360, which is one long take of the solar airplane, and then we've artificially inserted these cuts here. These cuts are kind of interesting because basically we're taking this one view, which is very interesting. It's from the nose of the solar plane, from the wing looking forward, which gives us kind of a POV of what the solar plane is seeing, which in this case is this pretty spectacular rounding of this snowy peak. But then, as of this point, the focus in the story is more on the plane. And so what we do is we use a forced perspective to basically cut at that moment to the solar plane. And the viewer doesn't really know that this is a cut of, it's just assumed it was maybe cut in Premiere as a 360 and that you've changed the angle of it, but it's actually being done on the fly in the player based on how this was authored. And then at the end of the sequence, when we see the plane from the side, and now we want to look at the front, we see this shot again. Okay, now that is one part of the equation. What we invented for Jackknife is something called conditional force perspective, which is based on exclusion zones, and we just received the patents for it, and it's a very, very unique feature. So what this actually basically does, it takes your viewing angle that you have at the moment into account and checks if you are already looking in the right direction. Because one of the things that would happen on such a forced perspective is if you're looking close to the angle where you're supposed to be looking, you would get a nasty jump cut. So let's say if I decided here to look around, actually, you know what? Let me switch it off, and then I can show you exactly what would happen. I'm going through here, and see, we got a forced perspective on him. But let's say we in the previous shot we were already kind of looking at him anyway, and something like this. Then you get this really not so nice jump cut, which you want to avoid. So what we do is we create these so-called exclusion zones, which here are marked by a red quad that I can actually configure. And what I'm saying is, hey, if I'm looking anywhere inside this already, don't do the forced perspective, because that would create a bad jump cut. So so basically, if I'm looking anywhere here, it'll do the cut. Let's try that out. Actually, let's keep that open. See, it's done it. Let's do it again. This time I'm looking already, and it doesn't do the jump cut. So what this means, and this is pretty significant, is there's no way I can get through the scene without actually seeing these cuts and the elements that the author wanted me to see. And so let's do that. So let's go through it this way. Actually, I'm just going to mute the sound here a little bit for myself. There we go. Here we go. So I'm looking at this. I get a nice cut to my airplane. There we go. This time I'm going to look sort of below. Whoops, that was a bit exaggerated. And here's the airplane when I look up. Or this time I'm kind of already looking at the airplane, and so it doesn't do the jump cut. So there's no way I can get through this without seeing the airplane while avoiding a jump cut. Similarly here, if I'm looking at this plane, but then I turn my head and already look ahead like this, which is the shot I would cut to the next time, it already is there, and we see no forced perspective being executed if I'm looking at the plane and I see it. So this is a really wonderful way to control camera in these 360 sequences that really can allow you as an author to tell the story that you want to, with that all being really invisible to the viewer. Okay, then let's look at another scene, episode 14, The Right Flight. This is an interesting scene to look at because it really combines a lot of different elements together all in one timeline. So let's, I'm just sort of going to skim through it, and then we can look at it in the authoring tool to see how that came together.
This is about as close to flying like a bird as humans can get.
So it starts off with a 360 video.
Glide for miles. The magic of efficient wings and the skill of the pilot create the wonder of gliding flight. Hang glider pilot Wolfgang Seiss takes us into the sky with him, giving us a bird's eye view. Notice how Wolfgang shifts his weight forward and backward for control and climbing. In this gliding machine, moving the center of gravity around is the up and down control. This aircraft has no elevator or rudder. For turning, the wingtips bend just a bit when Wolfgang swings left and right. This idea for controlling flight goes back 60 million years. Birds change the shape of their wingtips to add more lift to one wing.
And now what we have is picture-in-picture. So the 360 video has been darkened, and it's introducing a second element of a video over it. So we have this wonderful mixing of media. I'll go forward a little bit. After the sequence, we basically fade out, and we find ourselves with a model of the right plane flying towards us over a 360 sphere. And that's a model, and you can really see it in 6DoF when your head turns and looks around. We then go into a 180 3D scene with overlaid graphics, to see a model of this particular glider. And then later on, we're going to segue from this into a scene that includes a model and camera movements and a sky sphere. So you can see how you basically move in and out of these things. Now here's a nice little sequence. Let's look at a little part of this.
The Wright brothers borrowed from birds for the idea to add more lift to one side of the plane to execute a turn. They had observed buzzards for years and noticed the wings twisting subtly at the wingtips. You can see this guy sitting in a cradle, and when he moves from side to side on the plane, there are cables attached to all four corners of the wings that twisted the wing in such a way as to add more lift to one side. What they did,
and now watch as
is
we
build a
move.
mechanical system that translated the
It moves
subtle
over our
action of
heads,
bird
which is pretty wonderful in
into a
VR because
controllable
it's flying
flight
right over
system.
you. And then in the distance, you have a video of an archival footage coming at you.
In 1903, on the plains of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, this history began.
I'm just fast forwarding a bit.
In the modern planes, the Wright brothers put the ground into the air for the first flight on record. Since then, aviation
And then you are back in a 180 3D sequence. So I'll stop here. If you look at this in the Jackknife XR authoring tool, all these elements are assembled on a timeline, and they literally move in and out of each other. And that's a pretty wonderful way of being able to combine everything in one experience. And that's sort of the spirit of Jackknife XR, is that you can combine 180 3D and models and text and graphics, all in a timeline controllable by a keyframer, using model animations synced to bits of video, where you can put together very nicely a pretty complex experience. So, let me now show you a very important feature for Jackknife that we've just developed, and it's called Jackknife Live View. So what I basically can do is I can open a live web connection to any number of Oculus 2 devices and web clients, i.e. a 2D web, and I'll show you this, but it would work exactly the same way on the Oculus Quest in VR. And basically what I do is I launch this live synced player, and it takes a token that I can put in, which is, I'm Thomas Wallner, so I put in THWA, and then I can load a project like this. So this project is being loaded, and then I can move around in it. And what's interesting is that everything is in sync. So what you're seeing on the left side is via the web. That could be 3,000 miles away, and this is here locally. You can see that there's very little latency between the two. If you were wearing a Quest 2 headset, you would be seeing this in your Quest 2 headset at the same time. Now, what's really wonderful about that, I can actually author things. So let's say if let's see, I'm just going to orbit on John and focus on him. So I can see this, I can see, by the way, this is you can sort of see the wonderful real-time reflections here on the plane, and I can go in and out as I want to, and now I could make adjustments, okay? So for instance, I could play around with the shadow if I wanted to. So let's see, here I go into the shadow settings. Sorry, here, shadow. So I could change the blur factor on it, and then you see that that's actually happening in real time. So somebody could be, and we had to develop this for the Facebook project because we were all working somewhere else, and this really cuts down an iteration time because things can be seen rather instantly. So I could change maybe the height of the shadow if I wanted to. So if I now play here, and the play and pause are also synced as well. And of course, on the Quest 2, you can take over control and see it in your own way. Actually, look, when you play it, you see how small the latency is. Look how closely they're in sync. Just listen to the sound.
Idea of balancing invisible forces, of balancing
Here, I have to sync these. There we go.
invisible forces. This is the magic that powers flight.
So that means that somebody far away, I can be pretty sure that they're seeing what I'm seeing in sync. Now, they might give me instructions. You know, you might have a client or somebody or a collaborator you're dealing with, and you might say, okay, you know, John's a little big. Why don't we make him a little smaller? And you could do that. You could change. Hold on. Actually, his scale is being keyframed, so that's being overridden, so I can't do that. But let's say if I wanted to change his opacity, which of course I wouldn't because it would be kind of silly. But let's see, I could do maybe some of the transforms here. So I could move him up and down. You know, he's going through the airplane wing. Or let's say we wanted to, you know, change his position on the wing. This can all be done in real time. And that's really super useful. Have to move down a bit. There we go, and actually I can go really close to see when his feet intersect. But you get this idea that basically this kind of thing is very useful when collaborating, especially VR, when you can see those changes very instantly. That is highly useful here. So let's actually hold on. Just wanted to show you something on the plane. Oops, there we go. So you know, you get a sense of being able to work together in ways that are really fast and instant. What we're working towards is that you can then actually make changes in the Oculus Quest 2, so you can scale and rotate and do things in the client, in the VR Quest 2 WebXR client, and that data is sent back to be permanently recorded in the authoring tool. And then you've basically got a really wonderful workflow. This is also, so for instance, I often wore my Quest 2 headset while here locally while using the tool. And so I'd have my Quest 2 headset on, and at the same time I would be authoring here and see those changes instantly in real time. I didn't have to publish or republish. So that's, I would say that cuts down iteration time hugely. Once we had that in place, we were able to work much faster. Okay, so let's look at scripting and interactivity very briefly in Jackknife. Here's a scene from The Magic of Flight. It's a quiz to see if the viewer has understood the interactive concepts in this particular educational use case. So let's look at that.
It's America's least known game show. Let's play Find the Center of Gravity. Can you find the center of gravity of these objects?
So the way it worked is that all the scene itself was set up in Jackknife in terms of the placement of the objects and their animations. And then the interactions were actually scripted in JavaScript. And in Liquid Cinema, you can attach JavaScript to objects and to timelines. And then this is what makes the scene interactive. So if I choose this wrong one, it's wrong, this is wrong, and this is right.
Great, you found the center of gravity of the seed. Like a parachute, the center of gravity is below most of the physical area of the object. Now, can you find the center of gravity of the tube plane designed by John? It rotates as it glides, so your first clue is simply to watch it fly. It's a new spin on a very old idea. A hang glider has a center.
Okay, and so forth. So as you can see, you can bring, you can, in terms of what you want in JavaScript, it's up to you. You can create, good storytelling components nicely laid out in Jackknife that are then custom JavaScripted to create a high degree of interactivity.
Thank you, Thomas, for that incredible presentation. Wow.
That was amazing. So I guess the first question, let's just get this one out of the way. When, where, how can we get to play with this fantastic tool?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out myself. There is, well, it's for a couple of reasons. One, I would say it's in the state, you know, when you present things, they all look lovely and you can hide all the little defects and annoyances that, you know, we've done a lot of development in short order in the last 6 months. But there are certain things in the workflow we'd like to improve that would just make it, you know, better to work with. I could imagine pushing it out as a beta and saying, no help from us, go play with it and make something. Maybe that's something we could do. The other thing is that I have to figure out the business model around it. It's funny, you know, I watched the presentation myself and I keep saying Liquid Cinema, forgetting to say Jackknife, which is wildly confusing because those are two different things. But with Liquid Cinema, we also had to figure out, you know, a more corporate use of it versus individualized users who, you know, of which, you know, the market in terms of that kind of high-end creation is still fairly small. So you have to kind of make it work in some way. But our end goal is to basically make a platform play so that, you know, people at low cost can use this. And so, yeah, so I think we'll still be developing quite a bit. And I would work with some people and give it to them and hand it out to them and work with them fairly closely to also get feedback on how to improve the tool. But we believe it's going to be quite something, and that there isn't really anything like it out there, because it really is straight to WebXR, right? And it uses a metaphor that people can understand. The JavaScripting is also something that we would like to create a better framework for. So if you're a developer, you can work with it, but you'd have to really know the ins and outs of Jackknife to make it work. And what we want to do is streamline that. So it isn't just our developers, you know, doing the JavaScripting behind the scenes, which is what we did for the Magic of Light. So I'd like to be transparent and open, but we have well-formulated plans also to create what I call a very sophisticated behavior editor that will allow, without coding, to create pretty complex interactivity. That's a bigger job, but that's something we want to tackle.
Thank you. Rachel, do you have a particular question? Yeah.
I do. I want to get to some of the questions in our chat, actually.
Sure.
First, if that's all right. So first question for you is, lots of new features here, Thomas, exciting. Is the new tool on desktop? And it's the player that's using WebXR. Also, is the final result 360 mono, no stereo, right?
Yeah, so yeah, it is a desktop Windows-based tool. I could imagine a Mac version one day, because the code itself, like the UI, isn't even Windows-based, so it could be ported if we got the right money for it. It's a bigger job. And the player is pure WebXR, which is kind of unusual and kind of cool, I think, actually, because you get all the sort of ability to work with a local desktop authoring tool, and it is 6 DOF, 3 DOF, mono, stereo, whatever you're going to throw into it. And the player itself is actually based on the 3.js framework, which means it's going to be very extensible in terms of adding other things to it. And everything we use are standard web technologies. Actually, even the alpha channel videos where we've used kind of a top-bottom kind of standard standard H.264 format, which means you don't need any special codecs. It'll just run on any browser, all those transparencies. And that's pretty great, actually. So yeah, no special plugins.
Wow. Well, next question we have versus a comment. Wow, Thomas, this was top shelf. Can you speak to what other types of 3D objects might be used in Jackknife? I think maybe you did answer this, but like just different assets, stereo, 360 video, all the different types of elements.
Yeah, for sure. What we did right now in the first sort of pass at it for this Facebook project, we use GLB graphics. I think somebody mentioned them in an earlier presentation that they're quite WebXR friendly. We could down the line use OBJs and all kind of other things, but we didn't want to bite off more than we could chew this first kick at the can. And so, yeah, you can really, I'm going to say you can combine anything. That's the whole point here. You know, you can combine 180 3D, 180 mono, models, texts, graphics, Name something. I think we could throw it in there. Sound, bits of sound. You know, you can even write the sound levels in the keyframer if you want to. You know, monospheres, room models, you know, whatever runs in WebXR, you can put in there and stick on our timeline.
That's awesome. So our next question is, can scenes loop indefinitely until a user interaction happens? Like in your example with the center of gravity, how long can the user wait to choose an option?
Yeah, that's right. They can wait for as long as they want, actually. The way we did it, because, you know, we started out, Liquid Cinema was very timeline based. And really what you're looking at now is a hybrid timeline nodal model. And I think to be able to bring these two together is very interesting. So right now we just cheated by creating a timeline that is just super, super, super long, which was kind of a hack at this point. But the intention is basically to have a kind of scripting that is, you know, for those kind of things is not timeline based. And all of our scenes, by the way, can loop anyway already. So you can have looping scenes if you want to. And we can also jump between scenes if we want to. The Magic of Flight is all single scenes, but you know, we have a very complex mechanism for multi-branching stories, actually. And the tool has a very nice branch map where you can visually visualize all of your, you know, your jumps in your experience.
Well, I'd like to ask really quick here, if for people who are interested in using Jackknife, and I know you've got the rollout the way that you're going to do it, but could you speak a little bit to like maybe the learning curve? And also, is there an ideal sort of like, if somebody wanted to test this out for client use, like, is there an ideal project or like production workflow that would really be good to kind of begin with and get a framework for how to use Jackknife?
Yeah. I think the easiest kind of project that would work right out of the box right now is where you're putting together basically a linear story. And not to say that you can't do lots of interactivity, but it's something that you could just do right now without any programming, or without any additional programming, where you can, you know, what are the skill sets that you want? So for the Magic of Flight, we worked with a wonderful modeler named Brian Touchon. So he created a lot of models and animations in Maya and Blender and whatever he used, turned it into a GLB, which was a pain in the ass project. Process. Sometimes what I've learned on the project is that dealing with models is actually not simple, and compatibility between models. So poor Ryan was cursing quite a few times. And of course, for this particular project, we're creating new content while developing the underlying platform, which is a nightmare for any content creator. But that part is done. So anybody doing something similar now wouldn't have to go through that struggle. So I think that the skill sets and by the way, also shout out to Gavin Farrell here, who actually shot the 180 3D sequences in the museum. He was part of it. So I think you're looking at a multi-discipline team, and it's all about the asset creation, really. The tool behaves a bit like a nonlinear editor, in a sense. And it's about importing the assets that you want to assemble and then staging them appropriately. And like I said, it's sort of open whether you want to do your animations in a program that you know and then import the keyframe data, or actually bake them in to the GLB itself. Because you can, so for that airplane that you remember, the guy was standing on the airplane moving around, that is a GLB that actually had the animations of the plane already built in. So we just plopped it into Jackknife and it just ran. And then we childed John to an empty inside the GLB, and boom, it's all wedded together. I'm making it sound simpler than it's a little harder than that. I would say the learning curve on it, if we had proper instructions online, we just built it, okay? So, and I think what I'll be doing is creating tutorial videos and taking actually elements of this particular project and making them available so you can dissect and look at it. But I would say, you know, in terms of putting that stuff together, I think you could learn it in 3 days or so, like in a couple of days to do it. And then right now with any software that's being developed, it has some idiosyncrasies around its usability, you know, that we need to eradicate. But once you get used to the foibles, it kind of works. So, but I do believe that by, you know, the fourth quarter, it will be a much more a polished product in terms of working with. And that would be my goal, because our goal isn't to create complexity. It's to actually make complexity simple, so that you can basically create these things and then just push them out on WebXR and be done with it. And to me, WebXR, like we had players that were native in WebXR. I'm a big believer in WebXR. I think it's going to be really big. And the ability to use existing frameworks and have a tool where a regular person can create these experiences. That's really what we're trying to do here. It's to enable storytellers. Story in a more expanded sense, I would suppose.
Thank you very much indeed. That was incredible. I think we're all waiting now.
Yeah,
Yep,
I think we have a
yep.
lot
You're
of
able
people
to
in the
explain
audience
it,
who want to try.
Dying to give it to you. So yeah, and yeah, I hopefully we can, you know, find a way to work with the IVRPA around that.
Great.
And yeah, and I want to collaborate with some of your earlier presenters here around frame, because I want to bring frame like a Jackknife together and be able to
Gabe is a very open sort of guy.
Yeah, and be able to launch these experiences right out of frame would be amazing.
Yeah.
Actually.
Wow, that would be something.
Yeah, we could put our tutorial world into frame. So.
Right. Okay, I think we have to move along now.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a couple more presenters, and Rachel, you can introduce yourself.
Allow myself to introduce myself. Well, thank you so much, Thomas. That was fantastic. I'll actually pass it to Emily, because I introduce our next amazing speaker, Julie Smithson, at the top of the recording.